Jeremy Clarkson's pub looked dead. That was the story for about 5 minutes. No notice, no explanation. Doors closed on a Saturday. A place that should have been packed with bookings suddenly went silent, and the internet did what it always does when something surprising happens. It panicked. People assumed the worst. They said the pub was failing. They said the experiment had collapsed. They said the celebrity pub dream was over. And because it was Jeremy Clarkson, the whole thing got even bigger. The headlines were ready. The comments were ready. The verdict was ready. But the truth was very different. The farmer's dog had not shut because the business was collapsing. It had shut for one day so Clarkson could throw his staff a party. That one detail changes the entire story. Because suddenly, this is not a story about a pub going under. It is a story about a business model that most people misread from the beginning. And once you understand what was really being built there, the whole thing starts to look a lot less like a failing pub, and a lot more like a very deliberate commercial machine. Let's start with the part everyone keeps repeating. Clarkson himself joked that the pub was turning £100 into $94. That line spread fast because it sounded like a confession. A joke, yes, but also a warning. People heard that and assumed the pub was basically bleeding money every time someone walked through the door. But that was always too simple. Because a restaurant, especially one built around premium local sourcing, is not the same thing as a full business model. And the farmer's dog was never just a restaurant. It was designed to do more than feed people. It was designed to pull them in, keep them on site, and turn every visit into multiple transactions. That is the key. The food might be the weakest margin part of the whole setup. It might even lose money on its own. But if you stop there, you miss the entire architecture of the business. And that is exactly what most coverage did. The pub serves around 200 covers on a busy day. The menu is proudly British. Everything is sourced from the UK. No Coca-Cola. No imported ketchup, no foreign coffee, no avocado. Nothing on that menu is there by accident. That sounds romantic. And it is. But romance is expensive. British-only sourcing is not the cheapest way to run a kitchen. In fact, it is probably the opposite. It adds cost, complexity, and pressure on margins. It makes the food more of a brand statement than a traditional profit engine. Which is why the food cannot be judged in isolation. It is the hook. It is the reason people travel. It is the reason they wait. It is the reason the site has become a destination instead of just another pub. That is what makes the economics interesting. Because once the crowd arrives, the money does not stop at the dining table. At the bar, Clarkson's own Hawkstone beer becomes a completely different kind of weapon. This is where the real business starts to show itself. When customers buy a pint at a pub like this, they are not just buying a drink from a landlord who bought it from a supplier. They are buying a branded product tied directly to the same person who owns the site. That matters. At a supermarket, Clarkson gets one kind of margin. At the farmer's dog, the value chain is tighter, and the capture is much higher. The pub is not just selling beer. It is selling a product that sits inside the wider Clarkson ecosystem. That is why people who focused only on the food numbers miss the real picture. The food draws them in. The beer makes the visit pay. That is a much smarter model than people realized. And it gets even more interesting once you look at the rest of the site. Because the farmer's dog is not standing alone. Right next to it is the Grand Tour tent, permanently pitched on the grounds. And that is where the layout stops looking like a simple pub and starts looking like a mini retail campus. Inside that wider site, there are multiple ways to monetize the same visitor. If they cannot get into the main restaurant, they can go to the farmer's puppy, the outdoor kitchen that serves quicker, simpler food. If they want to take something home, Hops and Chops gives them a butcher counter on the way out. If they want products, branding, or souvenirs, the Diddly Squat Shop outlet catches that spend before they leave. That is not random. That is strategy. A customer who came for lunch might leave with beer, meat, and merchandise. A customer who came for a drink might leave with food. A customer who came for the brand might leave with all of it. That is how footfall gets turned into revenue. And it is why the headcount makes sense once you stop thinking of this as a pub and start thinking of it as a site-wide operation. Those 146 employees are not all working the same room at the same time. They are spread across a cluster of businesses sharing one location, one brand universe, and one flow of visitors. That is why the number sounds enormous if you think in pub terms. But if you think in destination terms, it makes a lot more sense. This is the part the press never fully explained. They treated it like a single hospitality story, when it was really a layered business story. That distinction matters. Because a single bad-looking number, like a food side loss, can make the whole thing sound broken when the broader structure is still working fine. And in this case, the broader structure is clearly doing something right. You do not get 25,000 visitors a year by accident. You do not get weeks-long waiting lists by accident. And you do not get that kind of attention by serving something generic that could be found anywhere else. That is the heart of it. Clarkson built a place people want to go to because it feels specific. People are tired of places that could exist anywhere. They want somewhere with a point of view. They want something local that actually feels local. Something imperfect that feels honest. Something that does not talk like a chain and taste like a spreadsheet. That is why places like this work when the concept is strong enough. People are not only paying for food, they are paying for belief. They are paying to feel they were part of something real for an afternoon. And if that sounds exaggerated, it is only because the modern food world has trained people to expect polished sameness. The farmer's dog is the opposite of that. It is stubborn. It is narrow. It is expensive to run. And it is completely committed to its own identity. That identity is also the thing that makes the place hard to copy. A national pub chain cannot easily do what Clarkson does without becoming something else entirely. It cannot suddenly go all British and still operate like a standard chain. It cannot build a business around a personality and then strip out the personality. Clarkson can get away with it because the personality is the product. That is what makes the model so unusual. And maybe that is why the pub story was always going to be misunderstood. People heard loss-making pub and stopped there. But the loss was never the end of the sentence. It was only one line in a much larger story. Clarkson himself has been surprisingly blunt about the whole thing. He has said he is done with business. He has said he is not motivated by money. He has said he just wants a good crack. You can take that at face value if you want, or you can look at what he actually built. Because a man who says he does not understand business has somehow created a site that combines dining, drinking, retail, branding, and visitor traffic into one working ecosystem. That does not happen by accident. It happens because somebody understood people better than consultants do. Consultants look at spreadsheets and forecast models. Clarkson looked at what people would actually travel for. That is why the opening worked. That is why the place is still drawing attention. And that is why the one-day closure mattered so much. If the business were truly in trouble, it would not be shutting down to celebrate its staff. It would be cutting costs, shrinking operations, and trying to survive quietly. Instead, Clarkson closed it to give his team a party. That says something important. It says the business is healthy enough to pause. It says the operation is strong enough to absorb the loss of a day. And it says the workforce is central to the whole machine. That is the part people miss when they reduce these stories to figures. A business is not just revenue and margin. It is also people. It is also culture. It is also whether the staff believe the place is worth building together. And if Clarkson wanted to show confidence in the business, that was a smart way to do it. Not with a press release, not with a corporate statement, with a party. That is very Clarkson too. Blunt, unpolished, a little chaotic, but strangely effective. And once again, the irony is hard to miss. The internet rushed to announce the death of the pub. In reality, it turned out to be a celebration of the team behind it. The internet saw a shutdown. Clarkson saw an opportunity to thank the people doing the work. That is a much better story. And honestly, it is the kind of story people remember. Because it has everything. A celebrity who everybody thinks they understand. A pub that sounds like a gimmick. A business structure that is more complex than the headline suggested. And a public reaction that got the story wrong almost immediately. That is exactly the kind of thing that creates huge retention. Because the viewer keeps waiting for the reveal that changes the meaning of everything they just heard. And that reveal is simple. The Farmer's Dog is not just a pub. It is a destination business built on footfall, brand power, vertical integration, and experience. The food matters. The beer matters. The retail matters. The staff matter. Put all of that together and you do not have a dying pub. You have a carefully constructed machine. A weird one, yes. A stubborn one, definitely. But a machine all the same. So the next time you hear someone say Clarkson's pub is failing, remember this. They are probably only looking at the part of the story that was easiest to misunderstand. And that is exactly how he wanted it. Because the real business was never about looking normal. It was about being impossible to ignore. And that may be the most Clarkson thing of all. Now I want to know what you think. Did the closure make you think the pub was in trouble too? Or did you see through the headline the moment it happened? Drop your country in the comments and tell me whether you think Clarkson has actually built one of the smartest destination businesses in Britain. And if you want more breakdowns like this, the real story behind celebrity businesses, the numbers behind the headlines, and the strategy most people miss, make sure you subscribe right now, because the next story might look simple on the surface too, and chances are, it is not.